Good to see each one of you. Good morning. And this is an unusual day. Joel Burbrink, our creative arts pastor, and his family are on vacation, as are lots of other folks. That's the time of year we find ourselves in. And we're glad that you have made your way to the Point on a very special Sunday morning. A few months ago, we had the opportunity to meet Steve Spear. And Steve was on staff at one of America's largest mega churches in the Chicagoland area. And he had been there for about 16 years, and God led him away to do something very unusual and something that you're going to hear about today. I posted a little video on our church's Facebook page to tell a little of Steve's story. He took off on a run, and there was a lot that led up to this. He didn't just take off, but he started out on a run at Santa Monica Pier outside Los Angeles and ran all the way across the United States to right there close to the Statue of Liberty, 3,081 miles, with the purpose of raising money for clean water. And you met his sponsor child, Winnie, if you were here last fall. And we're privileged to have Steve back with us today to talk to us a little bit about World Vision and the Monumental Marathon and some other things that are coming up. And we have grown to love Steve already from the time I met him, kind of a kindred spirit. So let's give a warm welcome to Steve Spear and welcome him to the service this morning. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, and the Point family. It's really cool to be back with you. As Steve mentioned, I was here last November with Winnie and her mom, Justina, and one of my colleagues from World Vision Kenya, Elizabeth. And if you were here, that was a special day for me and hopefully a special day for you. And I just want to say thank you. First of all, just thank you to Steve. It's been really cool getting to know Steve. He mentioned kind of that word kindred. You can kind of sense the kindred spirit with folks, and I feel that with Steve and with Team World Vision and the Point. So thank you so much. And actually, that's the first thing I want to say. I have a thank you for you and an announcement this morning. A thank you, an announcement. The thank you has to do with over the last couple of years, over 30 of you have said yes. Over 30 of you stepped beyond your comfort zones. Over 30 of you went beyond your fears, and you walked the Indy Monumental Half or Full Marathon in the last couple of years, which is pretty cool. And you've raised over $20,000 for kids with clean water in Africa. So that's what you guys got to give yourself a hand for that. That is fantastic. Way to go. And I don't know if you know this or not, but with World Vision is the largest non-governmental provider of clean drinking water on the planet. And it only takes $50 to provide clean drinking water to one person that lasts. So when you do the math, if there's been $20,000 that's been raised over the last couple of years, divide that by 50, that's 400 kids, 400 family members that have clean drinking water. They have a whole new future because of what you've done. And I know Stephen mentioned there's about 450 seats here in the room. So imagine almost every single chair filled with a child, a family member from Africa that previously didn't have a shot to the future, and you've given them that shot by providing clean water. And that's just a tremendous way to go, and a thank you. The other cool thing I want to say thank you for is last year when Winnie and I were here, over 60 of you decided to sponsor a child with World Vision. And we sang in an earlier tune that the worship team did for us, this idea that orphans finding a home. Something special happens when people recognize that they're not alone. And when you sponsor a child, you're effectively saying, I'm with you, I'm cheering you on, and I want to be your advocate. And you've done that. So from the thirsty communities in Africa, I wanted to show up this morning, and first of all, just to you, to Steve, and to the Point family, thank you. Thank you so much. The announcement is this. Today I'm pretty pumped because I get to announce that we're launching the 2018 Indy Monumental Half and Full Marathon, The Point Team World Vision running team. Yeah, I got no response. That's okay. I'm completely used to that. I know I lost like 95% of you because I use the words marathon and running in the same sentence. And that's okay if that's you. But here's the deal. 80% of those who run with us with Team World Vision, including me, 80% of us have never even run a 5K before. You see, we affectionately call ourselves the back of the Packers. That's just kind of who we are. We have some people on our team that run fast. It's not me. Team World Vision is for all shapes, for all sizes, from all ages, from young adults to retirees. And as a matter of fact, we have a couch to finish line training plan. I mean, we will take you from the couch to the finish line, and then right back to the couch again afterwards. We will do this. And the whole time, though, you'll be doing it to bring clean water and hope and life to kids and families in Africa. So here's what's going to happen. Right after the service, we're going to hold a 10-minute info session right down in this section. You all don't even need to move. You can stay right where you are. But we're going to do a 10-minute info session right over here. Coming up to the info session doesn't mean you're saying yes to running or walking the half of the full marathon, which is in November. It just means you're going to come get some more information, okay? And so I want to roll a video for you right now. And as this video rolls, I'm going to just ask you to say, God, are you whispering something to me? Are you speaking to me maybe a little bit about saying yes to this opportunity? And so take a look at this.
In 2006, one man heard a divine whisper that he could help the most vulnerable kids in the world by running marathons. So he said yes. He felt God ask him to invite others into the same vision, so he did. Many people felt scared of the unknown. Fear prevailed, and they said no. But many people pushed through that fear, and they said yes. The first year, 100 people said yes. The next year, 400 said yes. Then 1,000, then 2,000. As people said yes to new challenges and to changing the lives of kids and communities in Africa, their own lives started to change in drastic ways.
I started this year. This is my first year. I have only been out of a wheelchair for 2 years now.
In the beginning, I was like, my knees, I got too much weight, hold on. But I stuck with it.
And I just went all in. I thought I'm 55, why not? Bev did it at 60, I'll do it at 55.
This has really brought me back, helped me recommit my life to the Lord, but also to those less fortunate.
And plus the goal of bringing clean water, that's beautiful. So I was like, this is something I really want to do.
We really did a lot of training, just the two of us, and it was such a bonding moment of that time when your strength is faltering and the person next to you carries you through it.
Well, I've lost 75 pounds through this.
And I couldn't imagine my 7-year-old having to go run and get water for our family. So that what keeps me motivated and focused.
I plan on running a marathon every single year until I die.
Wow!
We'll see how that happens or how that goes.
Over the last 10 years, over 25,000 people have joined Team World Vision, and they just keep saying that magic word, yes. Every one of those yeses also represents kids in Africa who get to say yes to life, yes to health, yes to an education, yes to hope. Hundreds of thousands of kids. Every movement, every revival, every revolution in the history of mankind has begun because someone said yes. They are yes people. We are yes people. You are one too. As long as there are children in this world without clean water, we will continue saying yes.
So if you have a Bible with you this morning, if you want to open it to Luke chapter 8, we're going to dive into that in just a moment, Luke chapter 8. So when somebody hears that I ran across the United States, usually they want to know a couple statistics right out of the gate. So this image kind of tells it in part. The far left is how the run began. It began on April 8th, 2013. So I'm in my 5-year anniversary of this epic journey across the United States. So that's how the run began. That's at the far, as Steve mentioned, that's at the far west rail of the Santa Monica Pier. And when I got to that far west rail, I didn't exactly know how to start the run, but then it became almost an impulsive thing to fall to my knees. Say, all right, I effectually was saying, God, I'm yours. This run is yours. I have no idea what's going to happen. Fewer than 280 people in U.S. history, dating back to the early 1900s, have ever successfully completed a transcontinental run. By illustration, 10 times as many people have summited Mount Everest. Not that it's as dangerous, but the logistics involved are challenging. So I just said, God, I'm yours. This whole thing is yours. And then on the far right is how the run ended. As Steve mentioned, it was overlooking the Statue of Liberty at Battery Park. And I had a long time to think about how I would end the U.S. run. And it really wasn't going to be breaking through a tape. It was getting that posture of kneeling before the Lord and just saying thank you. So with my hands out over the Hudson, I said, God, thank you. Thank you for protecting. Thank you for your provisions. Thank you for your guidance of what happened. What happened in between those pictures, I'll just give you a few of the stats. I ran 3,081 miles, not that I was counting. I ran through 14 states. I went through 10 pair of ASIC running shoes. I consumed on average 5,000 calories a day. My run average was 35 miles a day, 5 days a week, so it averaged out to be a marathon a day for 150 days straight. We had over 300 different media placements. We figured I ate about 1,000 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches mid-run. Highest sustained elevation was in Arizona at 7,500 feet. Greatest aggregate elevation change was in the Allegheny Mountains in Pennsylvania. 1 week of running was 175 miles with 32,000 feet of aggregate elevation change. So if you ever want to do some good hill work, go to the Alleghenies. Toughest week was in Illinois, our home state of all places. It was in July. Not that you would keep track of July meteorological records in Illinois, but July 2013 was a hot month in July. Probably was a hot month in Indiana too. But I'd caught the flu in Oklahoma and lost a few days off the run schedule, and I wanted to make it on time to Chicago to be at our home church for a fundraising opportunity. So I needed to ramp up my mileage. So I upped it to almost 190 miles that week. I did better than 7 marathons in 7 days. And 5 of the 7 days, though, the heat index was 115 plus. So that it was a rough week of running, I'll tell you that. Scariest moment was being attacked by 6 wild dogs in Oklahoma. And finally, to date, the thing that probably brings the most, I guess, gratification, I suppose, if I could use that word, is $500,000 was raised for kids and families for clean water. And that means 10,000 kids, 10,000 family members have an entirely different future because Yahoo decided to put one foot in front of the other. But just to be clear, I'm like the most unlikely guy to have run across the United States. I ran my first marathon ever in 2007. It was with Team World Vision. In 2006, which was the first year of Team World Vision anywhere, was at the Chicago Marathon. There were 90 people who put on the orange jersey with Team World Vision that year, first year ever. One of those that ran was a buddy of mine, and he ran it. And the day after he ran the Chicago Marathon, he called me up and he said, "Hey, Steve," he said, "you need to run next year the 2007 Chicago Marathon with me and do it with Team World Vision." And I had a simple 2-letter answer for him, which was N-O, followed by the phrase, "I hate running." For 4 months, my buddy pestered me to say yes. For 4 months, I told him no. I said, "I don't need to run. I can write a check. I can sponsor another child. I do not need to run." And in April of 2007, after several months of him pestering me, I was all alone at our home. My kids and my wife were gone. And I had this little nudge from the Holy Spirit. You've got these before, right? It wasn't an audible voice, but this nudge that I sensed, or this whisper was, "Hey, Steve, all the time as a pastor, you're always inviting people to step out of their comfort zones. You're always inviting people to step into their unknowns. Why are you so unwilling to train for and run the Chicago Marathon?" And I didn't have a good answer. And in that moment, I felt like I was being called. So I called my buddy the next day and I said, "I'm in." He said, "What changed your mind?" I said, "I think it was God." I quickly established 4 goals for my first marathon. Goal number 1 was to hate running less every time I ran. Goal 2 was to train well enough to make it to the starting line. Third goal was to finish before they closed the course. These were not high goals. And then the final goal was to raise $1,000 for kids and families in Africa. And the bottom line, that first marathon felt like an invitation of sorts to me. Little did I know the story that God had planned, but I want to push the pause button on that for just a moment, and I want to bring you into a passage of Scripture that God continues to use to shape me, to mold me, and to complete His work in my life. And it's found in Luke chapter 8, and I just want to invite you to read a portion with me through this account. It says in verse 22, one day Jesus said to His disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat and set out. As they sailed, He fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake so that the boat was being swamped and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke Him saying, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." He got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided and all was calm. "Where is your faith?" He asked His disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey Him." One of the things that I love about Jesus were the invitations that He would offer to people. Some of his invitations were quite grand in their nature, and others of them were very innocent. This was a very innocent type. He simply said to the disciples, let's go to the other side of the lake. Seems pretty innocuous, doesn't it? Now, what happened as they did that was quite interesting. The first thing that we just read about is that as they sailed, he fell asleep. A couple of things here. Jesus, if we would have read in Mark's account, the previous couple of days, Jesus had been on his own marathon teaching schedule. So he undoubtedly was tired. He would have got into the boat. Jesus, as a distinguished guest, would have probably been seated in the rear of the boat. There would have been some kind of a carpet or a cushion there. One of the great mysteries of the Scripture is called the deity of Christ. The fact that Jesus was both fully man and fully God at the same time. So because of that fully man component, he was tired, he gets into a rocking boat, he falls asleep. Pretty natural thing to occur. As he slept, it said a squall came down. Now, the Sea of Galilee was super notorious for its storms. Even if the sky was perfectly clear and the waters were calm, a sudden squall could come down upon the lake just due to the topography of the region with the mountains and air patterns and such. And it was so great of a storm that in verse 23, it says that the boat was being swamped and the disciples were in fear of drowning. They thought they were going to die. Now, you got to think about this for a minute. Many of the disciples were experienced fishermen. They had undoubtedly been in other storms. If this was such a great storm that they thought they were going to die, it had to be a pretty bad storm. And I can almost imagine the conversation between the disciples saying, hey, somebody's got to wake up Jesus. Like, come on, we're like in deep weeds here. And I can almost imagine like Matthew saying to Bartholomew, hey, Bart, you wake up Jesus. Bart's like, Matt, I'm not waking up Jesus. You wake up Jesus. And they say, hey, Tom, you wake up Jesus. Tom, I'm not touching that one. I'm not waking up Jesus. Then somebody said, hey, Peter, you're always sticking your foot in your mouth. You go wake up Jesus. And Peter's like, why do I always get the bum rap? I don't know who drew the short end of the straw, but somebody did, and they had to wake up Jesus. And when Jesus awoke, what did he see? Man, he saw the terror in their eyes. He saw all that was happening with the wind and the waters. And in verse 24, it just simply reads this way. He rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided, and all was calm. Then verse 25, Jesus just looked at his disciples and he said, where's your faith? Another way you could translate this is, why are you terrified when I am with you? That could be the only phrase you need to retain this morning with whatever it is that you or I walked into this space with, that the master of the universe is saying, I'm with you, no need to be scared. We need that reassurance, don't we? The disciples needed that. Then the back half of verse 25, it says, and they were in fear and amazement of what had just happened. Another way that you could translate this is, they were filled with awe and they marveled. Now, I don't know about you, but I can overuse the word awesome like all the time. I can say, oh man, that was an awesome restaurant. That was an awesome movie. That was an awesome time to hang out. One of my number ones, favorite snack foods from the U.S. run were Oreo Blizzards. Love Oreo Blizzards. I tolerate dairy super well. At the close of every single running day, I would get an Oreo Blizzard or an Oreo McFlurry or an Oreo whatever from a local Tasty Freeze, whatever there was, and there was cold ice cream, I'd do it. I loved it for a couple of reasons. One, it put down like 1,200 calories. I'd get like a large every time and ask them to overfill it. And I get great calories down, and it would stimulate my evening appetite because I needed to pound down quite a bit of food to get ready for the next day of running. But every time I dipped into an Oreo McFlurry or Oreo Blizzard, and I did one this past week with my wife, we got a large one at our tradition, and every time I take a spoonful, I'm like, oh man, that is so awesome. I mean, I just simply love Oreo Blizzards. And there's nothing wrong, of course, with using the word awesome for blizzards or whatever it might be. But sometimes in life, we need to relegate that word awesome for that which is truly awesome. And when the disciples saw what Jesus had done to save their life from certain death, they said, that was awesome. Now, one might think their journey to the other side was over, but in reality, it had kind of just begun. Let me just read the next couple of verses here. Verse 26 is, they then sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. So get this, the Sea of Galilee is about 13 miles long. It's about 8 miles wide at its widest point, and scholars believe where Jesus and the disciples crossed was about 5 miles in width. So somewhere in the midst of this 5-mile journey, this vicious storm happened, and it was at night. Just a little bit freaky, okay? Then after they get settled from that, they land in a cemetery of all places at night, which is kind of very freaky times 5. Then they're met by this insanely disturbed individual at night. Now we're in the very freaky times 10 category, and the disciples are saying, Jesus, just a little tea, just something to kind of calm our nerves. But the drama wasn't over. The scriptures then say Jesus then begins a conversation with the demons that are inside this demon-possessed man. The demons request to come out of the man and to go into a large herd of pigs, which numbered about 1,000 in number. For reasons we don't quite understand, Jesus requested the request of the demons. They go into the large herd of pigs who rush down a steep bank, and they all die. Everybody is completely freaked out at this point. And a very natural thing happened to those who were tending the pigs. It says that the herdsmen ran off to tell what had happened. Now, the Greek word for the word ran here in its original form means ran. Nothing hidden here. They didn't walk. They didn't take their time. They ran and reported. And then the people from the town came out. So it would have been at night, so they would have had their torches and their lanterns. And what did they find? Well, they find the previous insane, crazy man who they knew. He had been a loner. He had been an outcast. But now he's dressed. He's in his right mind. And he's surrounded by community. The reaction of the townspeople is very curious, though. One would have thought they would have been filled with awe and joy in the way the disciples were just moments before when they were saved from the storm. But instead, it says that the townspeople were filled with terror. And they wanted Jesus to leave. Why is this? Why would they have been filled with terror? Here's my take. A man had been healed. That was undeniable. They could see that. But their pigs had been destroyed. You see, their pigs represented their economic stability. Their pigs represented their routine. Their pigs represented their agenda in life. Their pigs represented control. And that had been upset, and it had been disturbed, it had been unsettled, and they wanted the disturbing element responsible to leave. So what did Jesus do? He left. Jesus left. It's a pretty remarkable account, this one that we just dove into. And one would ask, what do you do with it? Well, you could take away from this that Jesus calms storms. He does indeed do that, doesn't he? We could take from this that Jesus is with us, that we don't need to be terrified. We could take from this that Jesus does restore and bring healing, that he does transform lives. We could talk about this for some hours, couldn't we? But there's one other thing that I'd love for you to consider with this. You never know what's on the other side until you go. You never know what's on the other side until you go. You see, Jesus is still in the business of offering invitations. He's still in the business of inviting people to the other side, to the unknown, to the different, to places that cause us to depend on him like we've never depended before. I mean, it was as if Jesus were inviting the guys on a journey. He knew exactly where they were going to go and what was going to happen. He knew what was in front of them. He knew that he would be inviting them into something that would increase their dependence on him. You never know what's on the other side until you go. You see, I thought my journey involved one marathon in 2007, but God had another story involved. The following year, in 2008, Michael Chitwood, who was featured at the beginning and the end of that video that you just saw, Michael's the founder of Team World Vision. And it was founded upon this idea that everyday people can step beyond their fears, to go beyond their comfort zones, and to trust what God might do, not so much in running 26 miles or 13.1 miles, but what God would do in the journey, normal, everyday people. And his vision was to root it in the local church, that local churches would have church teams that would run with Team World Vision. So Team World Vision began in 2006 with 90 people, the Chicago Marathon. I ran in 2007. But there hadn't yet been a pastor who was willing to stand on their stage and invite their church to run a marathon. So Michael came to me at the end of 2007. He said, hey, Steve, as we go into 2008, would you be the first pastor to launch Team World Vision in their church? And he said, and I said, yes, Michael, I would, because it had changed me. I got into the best shape of my life. formed some of the richest friendships, and they are my richest friendships now in my adult life that I've formed through Team World Vision. I'm 54 years old, and the deepest friendships that I have in my life have formed in the community that's happened by putting one foot in front of the other. And I said, I'll launch it. How do you do this? I thought that I really did think Michael had done this like 100 times. I didn't know that he'd only done it once. He was telling me like he'd done it 100 times. He'd done it at his brother's church in Fort Wayne. He said, it's really easy, Steve. All you do is stand on stage. I'll give you the words to say, make a 3-minute announcement, tell people we have a Couch to Finish Line training plan. We're going to show an inspiring video. We're going to invite people to a 10-minute info session after the service, and that'll be great. And I said, great, it won't work. I said, who in the world comes to church on a Sunday morning, like you, having no idea that a person's going to get up and invite you to run a half or a full marathon, and you're going to say yes? I just thought it won't work. So but I did it nonetheless because I felt like God had changed something in me, and let's give it a whirl. So I did the announcement, showed the video. We had about 800 adults in our service that morning. To my amazement, 75 people came up to the info session. It blew my mind. They were all shapes, they were all sizes, they were all ages. My first thought was liability. Like I really thought, I said, some of these people have no business running a marathon. And I remember whispering to Chitwood, literally saying, I whispered, I said, dude, how good is this Couch to Finish Line training plan? I'm worried. And over the course of that summer, 50 of the 75 people completed the Chicago Marathon training, completed the Chicago Marathon. It raised $65,000 for clean drinking water for kids in Africa. And it wasn't so much the money that caught my attention, although it did. It was what happened in the lives of those who ran. You saw it typified in that video that you just saw. I literally saw one marriage completely restored that summer. We had a marriage that was on the brinks of divorce within our congregation. The wife was attending our 9 o'clock service. The husband, because they just couldn't even be in the same space, he attended the 11. She was at that 9 o'clock service. She heard me talk about this marathon opportunity. She came up to the info session, put her hand in the air and said, I'm going to run. Her husband, having no idea that she had done that, was at the 11 o'clock service. God touched his heart, said he wasn't a runner, but God called him beyond his comfort zone. He came to the info session after the 11, put his hand in the air. Over the course of that summer, something about laughing and crying and sweating together rebuilt their marriage. The next time we offered a baptism service, we had like 7 people show up in the Team World Vision jersey saying, I've trusted Christ with my life. And I became an advocate of this. I said, I used the phrase, this is ministry magic. I know you probably shouldn't use those 2 words together, so don't give me too much grief. But something powerful happened with this. That was in 2008. Today, we have 450 church partners nationwide. We'll have over 15,000 people this year run a half or a full marathon. We'll raise $15 million for clean drinking water in Africa. In Indy, last year, we now have 35 church partners in the greater Indy area. Last year, we had 700 people put on an orange jersey, boldly ran in the name of the Lord and for the poor from 35 churches and raised over $600,000 last year at the Indy Monumental Race. And I just became an advocate for this. And you guys are in your 3rd year. I'm so pumped that we're doing this. So over the next couple of years, I just would encourage pastors to do this. My Team World Vision was my volunteer gig. And in the fall of 2009, it was on a Friday afternoon. You got to remember it was a Friday afternoon. 2009, in November, Michael Chitwood, the national director, called me. And he said, hey, Steve, I just wanted to say thank you for what you've been doing as a volunteer to help with Team World Vision, to let more pastors know about this. I want to invite you to something. And I thought, oh, this is cool. He's going to invite Francis and I out to a dinner, or maybe he's going to send us away to like a 2-day getaway somewhere. I don't know. And he said, hey, I'd like to invite you to go to South Africa with me next May and run the 56-mile Comrades Ultra Marathon and raise an additional $100,000 for kids and families in Africa. And my first thought was, Michael, you have a very odd way of saying thank you to your friends. And he said, well, do you want to go? And I said, no. I said, absolutely not. I said, I don't much like running 26 miles. Why in the world would I want to run 56 miles? He said, here's the deal. We got just a couple of late entries, though, and I got to know by Monday. It's Friday. He said, I got to know by Monday if you're in. I said, well, I can tell you right now the answer is no. I go home that evening, and I say to my wife, I said, hey, babe, Chitwood called. His last name is Chitwood. I said, Chitwood called and wants me to go to South Africa with him next May and run 56 miles in a race. And she said, oh, I think you should. I'm like going, no, you're not helping this at all. And Michael calls me back on Monday morning, and he said, Steve, are you in? And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, why? And I said, fear. Fear on like 5 levels. Fear of the race, fear of the training, fear of the fundraising. And then you remember the townspeople from Luke chapter 8? Fear of how it would upset the rhythm of my life, how it would upset my routine, how it would not be my agenda. It was something that would be outside of my control. And in that moment, Michael then said to me, Steve, other than fear, what's holding you back? And then the thought emerged in my mind, I know this is true about us who are following Christ or seeking God in our lives. God has some of the richest things for us on the other side of fear. And I knew that I was supposed to do this. This is a step of obedience. I had 4 goals for that race. Hate running less every time I ran. Trained well enough to make it to the starting line in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa. Finished before they closed the course in the mandatory 12-hour cutoff in Durban. And raise $100,000 for kids and families in Africa. To my amazement, all 4 goals were met. 6 months later, in the fall of 2010, I was on an innocent 6-mile run in St. Clairsville, Ohio, near Wheeling. I was there this past week, and I ran the same course, but it was on a Friday afternoon in November of 2010. I was on this run, and at mile 3 of the run, and I ran by the patch of pavement just this last week. This whisper came into my mind, Steve, you're to run across the United States for the good of others. I actually thought it was a bad taco from the night before. You know, I did not think that was authentic and real, because that's nuts. Who in the world runs across the United States? It's not done. It would just mess up everything in our lives. And because of fear, I didn't even tell my wife about that little conversation with God for a couple of months. And I don't know if you've ever tried keeping a beach ball under the surface of the water before. You know, it's summertime, so you'll do it. You push it down, it pops back up again. You push it down, it pops back up again. For the next 12 months, that's what I did with this whisper. And I finally got to the point in April of 2012 of probably just out of weakness and just saying, God, okay, I surrender. I completely surrender. I know you're calling me to devote myself more to running and how running changes lives. And if the expression of that calling is a run from LA to New York filled with more unknowns than I can count, I'm in. I don't get it, but I'm in. So my wife and I did what all sane people do. I resigned my pastoral role over 16 years at a very influential church. My wife sold her business she'd been building for 10 years, and we embarked as volunteers for me to train, for us to fundraise, and for me to run from LA to New York. And the driving question is why? Why would we arguably do what is the hardest thing I've ever done physically, emotionally? Why? Well, if you were here last November, you met the why. You met our World Vision sponsored child, Winnie. She was here in person at the point. This picture is when I first met Winnie near her home in the Rift Valley area of Kenya in 2012. And when I met Winnie at her home that day, they hadn't yet walked their 1-mile walk for water. 1 mile out, 1 mile back. They do it twice a day. It's what about 800 million people on the planet do. And I walked with her and her mom, Justina, the 1 mile out to this source of water. You can see in the background of this picture. And I could tell right away it was like a dirty pond is what it was. And I could tell right away that it was a contaminated water source. And it isn't as if there's clean water someplace else. There isn't. There just isn't. And then I asked Justina, Winnie's mom, who was right beside me, I said, Justina, I mean, they don't have many clothes. And I said, Justina, where do you wash, your clothes? And she said, oh, right here. And then I said, and where do you all bathe? And she said, right here. And then I saw livestock drinking around the perimeter of this pond and relieving themselves. This is their water source. And then I took that 5-gallon container that you see in my hands and I dipped it in and it filled with water. I knew the water filling that container would kill half the kids under the age of 5 in Winnie's village. It's called the infant mortality rate. It's a fact. And then I hoisted it up on my shoulder, and I did this once. She does it twice a day. And her pot was a little bit smaller, but as she gets older, she would be carrying one of these things. And it weighs 50 pounds full. Think of an old school microwave full of water. It's on your shoulder. Walk it back a mile. That 1 mile walk wrecked me. I mean, I was just wrecked on the inside, and I was filled with despair. I'm thinking, this is completely nuts. And then this thought of hope emerged in my brain. And the words actually formed. Wait a second, Steve. If you can run, or you can walk a few miles, and if you can invite others to walk a few miles when they don't think they can, you can change the reality for Winnie and thousands of kids like her. And those of you that were here last November, you met Winnie. She's now in school. She has clean water. She has dreams. She has visions. Her life has been changed. We do this, friends. We do this because we say yes to things. We say yes beyond ourselves. And she's my why. And I could tell you 55 more stories of what happened running across the United States. I could keep you here all afternoon. I won't. I will tell you two. This first one happened in Quapaw, Oklahoma. This is Larry. So what would happen when I would run? I would run 35 miles a day. About every 8 to 10 miles, my crew would stop me. They'd put out a chair. I'd sit down. I'd rest for a moment, take on some water, have a PB&J, and then take off running again. So on this particular day, they stopped me at the end of a dirt lane in Quapaw, Oklahoma. I'm sitting in the chair, prop my feet up in the back of their little car, and this guy drives by in his pickup truck. And he stops right when he gets beside me, and he looks at me sitting in the chair, and he goes, "Hey, that's a funny way to be changing a flat tire." And I'm thinking, at first thought is, buzz off, buddy. But I was trying to be kind. I said, "I'm not changing a flat tire." He said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm running." And he said, "Where are you running to?" Remember, I'm in Oklahoma. And I said, "Well, you won't believe me if I told you." And he said, "Try me." I said, "I'm running to New York." And he said, "I don't believe you." And then his next question was, why? Why are you running from LA to New York? And I pulled out a thing that we had printed, and I showed him a picture of Winnie, told him a little bit of her story, and he said, "That's amazing." And then he said, "How can I join your vision? How can I join your vision?" And I said, "You can write a check." And he said, "Well, my checkbook's in my combine. It's about a mile down the road that you're running on here. And when you stop by my combine or see it, I'll write you a check." And sure enough, he took off. I finished my PB&J and I ran. There's his combine, and I got up in there, and he was very gracious that day and wrote a very generous check as a part of the vision for what we're doing for kids in Africa. And I have no idea if I'll ever meet Larry again. I have no idea, but he shouldered a burden with me that day. It lifted something in me that I was quite grateful for. This last story that I'll tell you happened in New Jersey. This was within days of the U.S. run finishing. Something supernatural, almost unexplainable, occurred this day. First of all, I got a late start in my 35 miles that day. I didn't start until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which is a little overwhelming in and of itself. At about 6 p.m., with a gray sky at mile 25, I started up a fairly sharp incline. Now, I just finished this brutal week of running in the Allegheny Mountains, 175 miles with 32,000 feet of aggregate elevation change. The last thing that I wanted was another 2-mile climb. And my first thought was, why is there a mountain here? I'm in New Jersey. Isn't Jersey supposed to be flat? Evidently, I didn't know my geography really, really well of Western New Jersey. But with each uphill step, I just found myself getting more and more irritated. The irritation soon turned to anger at this stupid incline, anger at the ridiculous run, anger for how crappy I felt, and then anger at God. And I'm not proud of this, but that quiet road heard some choice 4-letter words from a very fatigued soul. And right after my fit of anger, a sense of aloneness swept over me. It was so real. And I knew dozens, if not hundreds of people were holding me up in prayer, but I felt alone and isolated like never before. And in the midst of that overwhelming feeling, I just put my head down and put one uphill step in front of the other. A moment later, I lifted my head, and there was a cyclist coming down on my side of the road. Now, as the cyclist grew closer to me, he failed to come off the shoulder to give me room to run. This added to my growing irritation. I thought, dude, are you playing chicken with me? What's going on here? I will stiff arm you off this bike. This pastor is in a bad place, and I will not feel bad about dropping you in the ditch. I just won't. And when he got about 20 yards from me, he stopped. And then he said, "Are you Steve Spear?" I was a little eerie, in disbelief. I said, "Yes." And then he said, "You're the guy running across the United States for clean water in Africa, right?" More disbelief. I said, "Yes." And then the next words out of his mouth floored me, as if what he, already said didn't. He said, "I just wanted to let you know there's a group of about 10 people a mile up the road, and they're ready to cheer you on. We heard about what you were doing." And then he said, We wanted you to know you are not alone. When those words came from his mouth, I was in complete spiritual shock. I was stunned, I was overwhelmed, I was blown away. And then this angel of hope rode alongside me. Previously, I wanted to deck him, but, shows you how fickle I am. But now he's an angel, and he rode alongside me. And sure enough, a mile up the road, here was this group of people ready to rock my world. And this image on the screen means probably nothing to you, but these are my New Jersey Angels. They saved something in me that day. They restored something in me that day. And for the next 10 or 15 minutes, we greeted one another, we hugged, we laughed, we shared about our mutual faith in God. I still had about 10 more miles to run in the day, so I didn't stay a super long time. But as I ran into that next mile, I marveled at the divine orchestration of the previous 45 minutes. Our faithful God had met me in the midst of my broken spirit and my sense of aloneness. He knew this son of his was in trouble, and he miraculously tapped a group of unknown strangers to surround him with presence and hope and to remind him that he is not alone. So family, here's the point. I have a reminder for you and an invitation. The reminder is this: you are not alone. You are not alone. Whatever it is that you walked into this room with that might have your world in knots in a swirl, you are not alone. Psalm 125 verses 1 and 2 read that as the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people both now and forevermore. You are not alone. You are not alone. He is with you. The invitation is this: that you would take that which might have you in your life right now stuck in fear, and that you would put one foot in front of the other out of that fear in the direction of faith. Say, God, this situation has me tied up. I don't know what to do with it. It could be a relationship that's broken right now. It feels irreconcilable to you. You've written it off, and God might be tapping you on the shoulder to say, pray about it. Pray about that broken relationship. Maybe the next step, if it's a healthy one, is to make the first phone call and say you're sorry. 3 days ago, there was a relationship in my life that I deemed irreconcilable. I deemed it broken and with no possibility for restoration. And I had a 6'5", 250-pound guy, eye to eye with me, telling me he was sorry for what had happened in this relationship. He had broken it. He had broken our relationship 15 years ago. And a relationship that I didn't think could be brought back again, this guy hugged me and wept like a baby. And fear had kept both of us from doing something. And I'm so grateful for that. We still got a long ways to go, as do relationships. But there could be that. It could be a dream in your life that you've not even gone public with, and you need to talk to somebody about the dream. Maybe it's selling some stuff. Maybe it's moving somewhere. Maybe it's coming to Christ for the very first time. My hunch is there's a person or 2 or 5 in this room that you've not yet trusted Christ with your life. You've not followed him. You've not moved past fear to say, God, I want you to lead my life, but you're worried about your agenda. You're concerned about your routine. You're not sure what Christ will do when he takes leadership in your life. Step beyond your fear, friend. Step out of your comfort zone and trust him. You see, God wants us to take those steps. You might also consider running a half or a full marathon. You didn't think you wouldn't get one more shot, did you? I'm serious. I really have everything within me thinks that something magically happens, not magically, but something spiritually happens when you put one foot in front of the other. Non-runners saying, God, I'm going to trust you for this. I truly want to invite you to come up to this info session afterwards. 10 minutes. Coming up to this will not mean you're saying yes. It just means you're going to come get some more information and just see what God might do in your heart and in your life. And let our Couch to Finish Line training plan carry you. And I will guarantee you this. I will guarantee you this. When you cross the finish line, not if, when you cross the finish line of the Indy Monumental Half or Full Marathon, you will not regret it. I've met thousands. Nobody regrets this. Something will change in you. You will grow in community. It will be pretty powerful. Mother Teresa, not long before she died, was interviewed by a young reporter in India, where of course she was working in the leper community in Calcutta. And this reporter asked her, he said, Mother Teresa, in the midst of the overwhelming need that you face every day, how do you ever expect to be successful? And Mother Teresa looked back at this guy and she said, God has never called me to be successful. He's called me to be faithful. That's what we're called to do, friends. It's faithfulness. One faithful step in front of the other. Thank you so much, and God bless you guys.
Thanks, Steve. Well, as we go this morning, I just want to tell you one thing. You cannot go wrong obeying God. I know you know that, but it's a reminder that we all need to hear every once in a while. If God's spoken to you, I want to encourage you, just come on into the meeting. Just sit in for a few minutes and listen to what Steve has to say, and then you can be on your way. We don't use shame, guilt, or manipulation around here. We just say to you, hey, we want you to come and be open to what the Lord wants to say to you. And as we talk about pointing people to Jesus, we want you to hear from Him and listen to Him. That's what this new series is going to be about. And when you do it, you will never regret it. So let's stand together and be dismissed in prayer. Thank you for being here. Steve, thank you for coming. Love you, brother. It's been a joy. So let's pray. Father, as we prepare to meet and some prepare to go on our way as we enter into a new week, we want your will to be done in our lives and in the life of this church. And I pray that you would just help us to get sensitized and tuned into your Spirit, that we would be willing to listen to that still small voice, whether we turn to the left or to the right, that we will hear that voice behind us saying, this is the way, walk in it. It's a decision we'll never regret, whether it's a decision to walk away from addiction, to restore a relationship, or to choose to follow you. And I just pray for every person here in this service that your will would be done in our lives and that we would just say, yes, Lord, to your word, to your will, and to your way, for your glory. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. If you're going to meet, come on down. It's going to start within the next couple of minutes. Have a great day.